Hello, I'm Robert Simmons. I'm talking to you today from my studio in New Zealand, and I'm continuing my set of videos about different stones and their spiritual qualities. We're in May of 2020 right now, so we're still experiencing a lot of worldwide events that have been generated by the pandemic from the coronavirus and all of the many permutations that come out of that. And as I've been going through this time, I've been asking myself, what stones would be best for me to talk about to be of the most use and benefit to people during these times that I think are times of profound transformation in the world, not only on the mundane level of what's going on with the pandemic and with the economic consequences that have come out of that, but also there's a kind of a spiritual shakeup, you might say, or a destabilization of old patterns that gives an opportunity and, in fact, an urgency toward people going deep and doing the inner work that is appropriate for the time and for our own path. And I feel as though transformational times call for and evoke rapid accelerations and transformations of our spiritual development. And the stone I'm going to talk about today is a wonderful stone for catalyzing that in your life, and that stone is Moldavite. So Moldavite is the stone, if I could only choose one stone to take with me and have on a desert island, it would be Moldavite. And Moldavite is the stone that first awakened me to my own sensitivity to stone energies. This goes back a long way. This goes back actually all the way to the 1980s. And I'll just talk a little bit about that time and about what my own path has been and also what I've learned along the way about Moldavite and what may be useful for you to hear about that. So, first of all, for those of you who want to know what Moldavite is and looks like, here are a couple of very nice pieces of Moldavite out of my collection. Not easy to see in this light, but Moldavite is actually not a black stone. It's transparent or translucent and green. You might get a bit more of it in this one. And these are all some of my very favorite ones. Moldavite is an extraterrestrially generated stone. And by that I mean Moldavite is the product of a meteoric impact. 15 million years ago, a very large meteorite hit the Earth in what is now the Bohemian Plateau of the Czech Republic in Europe, in Eastern Europe. And there's a lot of scientific disagreement on what Moldavite is, whether it is a silica-based meteorite or whether Moldavite is the product of the fusion of earthly rock and the meteoric material that hit the Earth 15 million years ago. There's not any debate that Moldavite is that old and comes from that event. That's pretty well settled. Moldavite is all found in the Bohemian Plateau of the Czech Republic, in the area of what they call the Race Crater. And the whole Bohemian Plateau, it turns out, is actually a meteor crater. And the mountains that ring the Bohemian Plateau are the edges that were formed when the crater was made when the meteorite struck. Now, to give you an idea of the power of the event that Moldavite came out of, and I personally agree with the scientists who suggest that it is a fusion material, that the meteorite that hit the Earth in that event generated so much heat that it it itself exploded and was and the explosion meant that it vaporized a good portion of the meteorite, and also the earthly rock that was hit by the explosion vaporized, and this vapor went shooting up into the stratosphere. That's how big this impact was. And if you can imagine, you heat up ice and it becomes liquid water, and you heat the water up and it becomes steam. So imagine that with stone. You heat the stone up enough till it's liquid, and that's a bit like lava or magma. But if you heat the stone up so much hotter that it actually vaporizes, that's the form that in water we would call steam. So Moldavite, I believe, and I get this from the science I've read about it, was vapor, rock vapor, that was created by this explosion that was shot up into the stratosphere. And in the stratosphere, it cooled while it was up there enough to turn back into liquid form. And the Moldavite that fell in a shower was liquid glass when it fell. So you can see this piece is shaped a little bit like a droplet. And there are some that show even the striations like the air lines, that the lines that might be caused by wind resistance as something liquid came down. This one has sat in the soil and been etched by the acids in the soil, so it has a lot of little convolutions in it. But here is another one that is quite smooth, and this is the end part of a big droplet. If this hadn't broken after it landed, this would have had a long tail on it. And that's the droplet shape that has to do with Moldavite coming down as a liquid. So, excuse me, the meteorite hit. The force in terms of explosive power of the Moldavite meteorite event was estimated at 6 trillion megatons, which is many, many times more than all the atomic bombs in the world. The power of the impact was so great that it went through the Earth's crust and into the liquid core. In fact, into the liquid core, the magma, I should say, of the Earth. And there was enough energy in that penetration that it shifted the currents in the iron core of the Earth sufficiently that it reversed the Earth's magnetic poles. And that's another fact that science has derived from analyzing the electromagnetic residue in the Moldavite and in the rocks that it's found in the same area. So the event was big enough to reverse the Earth's magnetic poles. It was huge enough to be that many megatons, and the heat was intense enough to vaporize rock, throw it into the stratosphere, and it came back down in a liquid form and hardened eventually as it cooled into the stones that we now call Moldavite. And strictly speaking, Moldavite is not a crystal because formed in such rapid fashion with so much heat, the crystallization process that forms quartz crystals, for example, didn't have time to happen. So Moldavite is what geologists call an amorphous crystal, which means a crystal without a regular lattice. The lattice of Moldavite's molecular structure goes in every direction rather than in regular geometric patterns like quartz. And I think this has something to do with its energy as well, because where we might compare crystal energies in terms of something very steady and dependable and even definable in terms of the kind of qualities that they manifest, Moldavite is, first of all, kind of like, of all stones, it's the fast and the furious. It's the one that is the most rapid transformer of your life if you have its influence come into your life. And it also has a trickster quality to it, which I'll get to a bit later. So what about Moldavite in terms of human history? We've already talked about its physical origin and how long ago it came here. How long ago did people start getting interested in Moldavite? And that's something that surprised me when I learned it, because people have been collecting Moldavite and viewing it as a sacred stone for at least 25,000 years. Neolithic people, 25,000 years ago, in the part of the world where Moldavite is found, used it as an amulet. And in fact, Moldavite was found in amulets in the same archaeological digging site where the original Venus of Willendorf, the oldest known goddess statue, was found. So we can say that Moldavite is associated with the beginnings, as far as we are aware of them, of goddess worship, and perhaps even of human orientation towards divine beings. But certainly it is connected to that oldest goddess statue. And the Venus of Willendorf, many of you will have seen it, or you can look it up, but it's kind of a fertility type goddess. She's very large and voluptuous and typical of what Neolithic people would view as a way to depict the life-giving fertility of the goddess. So Moldavite is associated with that energy and that kind of being all the way back to the origins and before the origins of human civilization. Now, if you fast forward a few thousand years, quite a few thousand years, one of the other places Moldavite pops up is in the legend of the Holy Grail. And if those of you who have read the Holy Grail story, especially the one that was written by Wolfram von Eschenbach, I believe was German, and it was around the 12th century, in that legend, the stone of the Holy Grail, which was to say that the Grail in that legend was not viewed as other legends show it as a cup or a chalice, but was viewed as a stone. And it was said to be an emerald that fell from the sky. So now if you think about the Moldavite, I mean, we know that it fell from the sky. And if people were intuitively perceptive, they might have been able to tell that this stone was a sky stone. And then another thing to say about that is that the ancients thought that pretty much any stone that was green, any gemstone that was green, they named it emerald. They didn't have the distinctions between different green gemstones that we have now. So an emerald that fell from the sky is a very clear description of a stone such as Moldavite. And in fact, Moldavite is the only stone that ever fell out of the sky. It's the only meteoric gemstone ever discovered. There are a few other stones in the same family. Moldavite is a member of the tektite family, and tektites are glassy objects formed in the same way Moldavite was through these meteoric collisions. But pretty much all the other tektites are black or almost black in color and are not really gemstones because they don't lend themselves to, they're not transparent and colorful enough to be gems. The one exception to that is a gold-colored, a yellow stone that I call Libyan gold tektite. And it's a close cousin to Moldavite and very powerful in its own right, but we won't focus on that today. But in any case, so the gem that fell from the sky is Moldavite, and that is what they said the stone of the Holy Grail was in the ancient legend that was told by Wolfram von Eschenbach. Now, what were the powers? What is the Holy Grail? It's a big story, and we'll just barely touch on it. But I'm very interested in it because it does touch also on tangentially touches in on alchemy, which is my lens for viewing all the work with stones these days. The Holy Grail was depicted as an object, of a sacred object, whether it was a cup or a gem or some other forms that it has been written about in. The Grail was a sacred object. It was matter that was divine. And it had the capacity to give each person what they most desired, or you might say to fulfill their destiny, or to bring satisfaction to the heart. All those things in a way are the same thing. And in the legends of the Grail, they symbolize this by saying that the Grail could give each person what they most wanted to eat and drink. But eating and drinking were really symbols for the taking in of that which is most essential and most satisfying and most wonderful for each person and different for each person. So that's why I think of it as destiny. So the gem that fell from the sky that happens to be green, and its property is to fulfill your destiny. That's what the Stone of the Grail was said to be. Now, an interesting side part about that is that the legend of the Holy Grail I thought of originally as a legend from England. And I thought, well, Moldavites from Czech Republic area, how does that connect? How could it be Moldavite? And the reason I thought this was because a mystic named Nicholas Roerich, who's a fantastic visionary painter as well as a political activist and spiritual leader. I think he was around the turn of the century, from around the early 1900s. He said he went on a search for Moldavite, or for the gem he called Agni Mani, which turned out to be a green gem from space, and I believe it was Moldavite that he found. And the reason he sought it was he felt that it was the catalyst for world transformation. So big stuff. And he was the one who originally said that this stone was the same as the stone of the Holy Grail. And just, again, a little bit more to say about Roerich. Many of his paintings depicted a treasure that was, he called it the treasure of the world, and it was an object that was inside a little, like a little tiny chest, like a jewelry box almost, with a curved top. And when the chest was open, it emanated golden light. Another interesting thing in regards to its comparison to Moldavite, because Moldavite seems to generate golden light inside us when we meditate with it. And we'll get to a meditation at the end of this little talk. So I'm giving you a lot of the details about the comparison of Moldavite to the Stone of the Holy Grail. And I would say the most important one is that catalyzation of your destiny, that acceleration of your evolution. In the Grail story, the hero, Parzival, was kind of an irresponsible, foolish young man who wanted to be a knight but didn't really know what that meant, and he just really wanted adventures, and he kept getting himself into trouble, and he kept getting interested in the wrong women, and lots of things that are really common in young men, until he saw the Stone of the Holy Grail brought in to the Grail Castle during a ritual. And from the moment he beheld the Stone of the Grail, from the moment its energy went into him through his eyes, he did the right thing. He was led along the right path even when he tried to choose the wrong path. And he was led to his true love even when he tried to get interested in women that were not his true love. So the guiding energy of the Stone of the Grail was a big part of what was in that story, and it is also a big part of what I think Moldavite's energy is about. So I'll talk about that, and that's my own story. How did I find Moldavite? Great story to me. It was 1984. I was a jewelry designer making my living that way, and I was traveling, selling my wares to jewelry stores, and I didn't have very much heart for my work. I was spiritually interested. I'd had some spiritual experiences early in my life that made me study all kinds of philosophy and spiritual writers like Alan Watts and so forth, and it made me do explorations in flotation tanks, and it made me take in entheogens like mushrooms, and I was always trying to replicate my early spiritual experiences. So that was what I really cared about, but I had to make a living, and I was a jewelry designer. So one day I was driving to an appointment on Cape Cod, and I was thinking to myself, I really don't love my work. I wish I could do something more interesting and something that nobody's ever done before. I wonder, what would that be? What could that possibly be? And all of a sudden, I had a vision. I saw in my mind's eye a golden colored comet, meaning a comet actually made out of gold metal, a piece of jewelry, with a meteorite in the head and gold and diamonds in the tail, so it sparkled. And I suddenly just immediately, like as soon as I saw that, I was like, this is the thing I can do that nobody's ever done before. I'll put meteorites in jewelry, and I'll make them into beautiful comet-shaped pieces, because Halley's Comet was coming in about a year and a half from the day I had that vision. And I thought, in those days, I wasn't really spiritual yet, except for my longings. But it had been a long time since I had a really good experience. So I was thinking about business, and I thought I could make those gold comets with meteorites and sell them for Halley's Comet memorabilia, and people will buy thousands of them, and I'll be wealthy. It's funny how the universe will sometimes put a carrot in front of you to lead you somewhere that you might not go if you didn't have the carrot, but it's not actually where you thought you were headed. And that's what happened to me. When I had that vision, I got so excited by the idea of making comet pendants with meteorites in them, and I completely drove past my highway exit for my appointment. I went 40 miles further down the road before I realized it. And when I finally did, I went, oh my gosh, I missed my appointment, but I'm almost here by my friend Don's house. I'll go see him, because my friend Don had a program selling astrology pendants through a credit card company, and he'd sold, like a huge amount, like 60,000 pendants or something. And I thought, okay, I'll do that with mine. So I again, the carrot. I went to his house instead of going back where thought I was going that day. And when I told him my story, he liked the idea, and he said, metal meteorites are pretty ugly, and they're hard to get in small sizes for jewelry. Why don't you use Moldavite instead? That's a meteorite, and it's a gem. And I said, Moldavite? What do you mean Moldavite? I've never heard of that. So he dug around in his study, and he came back a couple minutes later, and he had a magazine from 1958. It was a Lapidary Journal magazine from 1958. 26 years later, he still had it. And in that magazine was an article that had been written about Moldavite. Not only about the meteoric origin of Moldavite and its geological and gemstone qualities, but also what people felt about its spiritual energies. And this was brand new to me in the 80s, although the crystal fad, as they called it then, had gotten started, but I wasn't really aware of it. So this article from 1958 talking about the spiritual powers of this gem from outer space called Moldavite was my first exposure to that. And as I read the article in my friend's living room, I got chills. I felt energy come up my spine and into the back of my head, and I got prickles on my neck, and I thought, something's here. And I thought to myself, for God knows what reason, I thought, this is the touch of destiny. And I remember thinking, I've got to see if this man is still alive. I've got to try to call him or something. So I looked up on the article's beginning and it said where he lived. So in those days you could call for information, directory assistance, and I did that. And they gave me a phone number for Mr. George Bruce, the writer, and I called the number and the phone rang and a few rings went, and then there's this very old voice answers the phone, hello? And I said, hello, my name's Robert Simmons. I've just read your article about Moldavite. And the voice on the other end said, you just read my article? And of course, it was 26 years later. But we had a fantastic conversation. We talked to each other for probably 45 minutes. No, it was longer than that. It was like an hour and 45 minutes about Moldavite, about his excitement over it, about the excitement he was feeling that somebody was interested in it after all this time, and about his own beliefs about the spiritual powers of the stone. So this was before I even knew about or believed in crystal energies at all. So this was the very beginning of my own transformation too. He sent me Moldavite, a few pieces from his collection, and I proceeded to get ready to try to make my comet pendants with it. So the comet pendant process was another carrot. The credit card company liked my idea. They said, we want to do this. How long will it take you to get enough Moldavite to make 60,000 pendants? So me, in my 30s, with very little money, borrowed money from everybody I knew, and got enough Moldavite. It took a long time to find that much because it wasn't in the marketplace. I got enough Moldavite to do that project. And right about the time that we were ready to start the project, they canceled it. So that was a bit of a shock, but it was one of those things where the carrot leads you the way you need to go, whether you know why or not. Another interesting thing had happened in my life that has to do with Moldavite, and that is I met my wife, Kathy. I won't go into that whole story except to say that I met her immediately, kind of love at first sight sort of thing, although it was confusing. And within a few days, after our first meeting with each other, I had her visit me, and I knew she was into crystals. And so I said, well, you're into crystals. Why don't you see what you get out of this Moldavite stuff that I have? So she was sensitive to stones, felt the Moldavite, stood there for a long time, didn't say anything. I thought to myself, did this woman fall asleep standing up? But in fact, she had been taken, she told me when she came back, out of her body, out into the stars. She saw the earth from the stars, and she was told by her spirit guides, this is a stone of great importance for the evolution and spiritual awakening of the earth and the people of the earth. So she opened her eyes and she told me that. Having just met this woman, I thought, I'm in love with a crazy person. I wasn't really into crystals at that time. But fortunately, I was in love, and we proceeded anyway. She was the one who got the phone call when the credit card company canceled our project. And she immediately knew it meant that the spiritual purpose of Moldavite was the real reason that I had it. And she told me, when she told me about the phone call, she said, Robert, don't worry about this. This just means something more important is happening with this stone. And boy, was she right. So eventually we got married, and we opened our store called Heaven and Earth to symbolize the union of heaven and earth that Moldavite and crystals were meant to facilitate. And that was the day after we got married. We opened that shop. Our business grew from there and is still in business as a mail order business. You can get the link at the end of this, underneath the video. But that was the way that Moldavite got started in my life. And I've got to say this, one of the things that is the most common thing people report about Moldavite's energy is that it facilitates rapid transformation, whether you're ready or not, whether you think you're ready or not. You attract what you most need. The things that are not good for your development and your evolution, or the fulfillment of your destiny, if they're in your life, they start disappearing from your life, whether that is jobs, relationships, or other things, habits. Even if you don't intend to let them go, they go. The new things that you need to fulfill your destiny, fulfill your spiritual pattern of your life, are magnetized. That's something that I experienced, and many, many people have written me letters about that. So, that's one of Moldavite's many and major characteristics. Now, how did I get from the place where I thought my wife was crazy to where I'm a writer about stone energies? Moldavite's right in the middle of that too. Kathy insisted, since I wasn't really a believer in stone energies, but we were going to open a shop together and we were married, excuse me, she said, Robert, you need to meditate with your Moldavite every day. And this is the one that I did that with. This was my very first piece of Moldavite. That was my own. So I sat at her encouragement every day for a half hour and meditated with this stone in my right hand. Now, early on, I really, really wanted to feel something. And she could feel stone energies, and our customers, after we opened our shop, could feel stone energies, but I still couldn't. So I thought, well, if I'm not getting it from one Moldavite, maybe if I put my hands in 2 buckets of it, I'll feel it. And so I tried that for a while, sitting there meditating on the more is better theory with 2 buckets of Moldavite, and that didn't work. So then I went back to just meditating with this one piece. And I had a bit of music going on behind, in the background all the time when I did this. And then one day I decided, nothing's ever happening and I'm bored. I think I'll pretend that something's happening. I think I'll imagine that I can leave my body. So I imagined sitting there, meditating, holding my Moldavite, that my spirit was going up above my body and that I could look down and see my body. And I did a good job of visualizing that, and I could see myself from above. And then I thought, well, that's cool. Maybe this is more interesting than usual. I'll see if I can go a little higher. Can I go up through the roof of the house? And I could imagine that, and I could see the roof of the house from above. And I could see the neighborhood, and I could see the ocean in the distance. And I kept going a bit higher. And there was a point, it's a very kind of don't know exactly when it occurred, but as I was rising higher and seeing more and more of the geography of our area, I stopped. I was no longer trying, and I still kept going higher and higher up, and I could still see everything. So that's a really important point about meditation with stones that I like to encourage people to do. You can begin by visualizing, and what that does is that takes you to the gateway of the spiritual experience. As my wife Kathy told me, imagination is the gateway to spiritual experience. So it's not cheating to imagine that you're going down into a cave, into the underworld to meet the guardian being of a stone, or that you're going above your body to take a journey with a stone, or whatever it is that the imagination may be. You begin by putting your energy into the imagining, and then there'll come this magical point in many cases where the meditation takes off on its own and things just happen. It unfolds. And that's what happened to me for the very first time in my life on that day when I was holding the Moldavite. I went up, and then once I got to however high, It was effortless, and I just kept going further and further. And I could never lost track of the fact that I was in the room and that I had my body and that the music was playing, but there was on dual tracks. That was one reality, and this was another one equally vivid, in which I was traveling out into the stars. I left the earth behind. I could see it as a globe. I went on past the moon, and soon I couldn't see the earth anymore. I could just see stars everywhere. And in that meditation, I found myself attracted to a beautiful golden star. And so I thought to myself, I want to go there. And I found that I was moving toward that star, and very, very fast. And in a matter of a very short time, it was no longer just a spark of light. It was a sun. And it was a golden sun, a beautiful, beautiful golden sun. And I was near it, like the way the earth is near the sun. And I noticed that there was a procession going around this golden sun of millions of gold-colored little small replicas of the sun. Like they looked like small golden suns, like this big. And each one had a thread of gold light connecting it to the great golden sun in the center. And I was in the procession among all these golden orbs. And at some point, and it was holy, they were all in holy, rapturous rapport with the great golden sun and connected through their golden threads. So I envisioned, I then I thought to myself, I'm out here with all these golden orbs, wonder what my body looks like out here. And I sort of looked down to where, from whatever point of view I had, I would look down at myself, and instead of a physical form like a human body, I saw another of the golden orbs, and I realized that was me in that place. And then in my vision, in this meditation, a voice said, the light without is identical to the light within. In other words, the central sun was identical to the light within me. And in that moment, back in the room, holding this Moldavite, there was a tingle in my right hand, like electricity. And then electricity went right up my arm and to my heart. At that point, my heart blossomed. It just went like a flower opening inside my chest, a flower of golden light. And from that point, a column of light went up and a column of light went down, all through all of my 7 chakras. And as the column went up, it opened my throat, it opened my third eye, it opened my crown. And as it went down, it opened my solar plexus and my second chakra and my first chakra. And then when all 7 chakras, like flowers of light, were open inside me, this gold white light coursed up and down, filling me with ecstasy. And I was just completely enraptured. I came back to my body in the room at that point, and I allowed I just was completely immersed in the experience of the light filling me up and electrifying my body and making me feel completely full of bliss. So my wife Kathy was upstairs getting ready for work when that occurred, and she could feel it. She could feel something happening. She came downstairs, looked across the room at me, and she said, "Robert, you're full of light." And I said, "I know." And we spent about, an hour and a half there, she with me, and I just slowly told her what had happened and spoke from what had happened. And emotionally, it was extremely wonderful, but also rather overwhelming. So it took a little time for everything to calm down. Not that I was in any hurry for it to do that. But we ended up eventually opening our shop. And that day, when we walked in the shop for the very first time, I could feel every single stone. I could feel the energy from every single stone in our shop. I went from feeling none to having that opening with the Moldavite and then feeling all of them. So that was a sacred day in my life history, and it completely changed my path, because once I could feel the stones for myself, I was very, very keenly interested in exploring everything about them. And all my books, the Book of Stones, the Moldavite book came first, Moldavite, Starborn Stone of Transformation, then the Book of Stones and Stones of the New Consciousness, and my new book, The Alchemy of Stones. All of those evolved out of the awakening of my capacity to sense and perceive and understand and also see as visionary images the qualities and energies of stones that were triggered by Moldavite opening me up that day. So, you know, given that that was such a life-changing event, I always recommend Moldavite highly to everybody. And it's been interesting because when we opened our store in 1986, nobody had heard of Moldavite. And we had many, many things happen where people from all over the world came to our little town to get Moldavite from us those first couple of years, because it's the information about it spread like wildfire. I could say a lot more about that, but I can see already I've talked a long time, so I'll go a little bit more into Moldavite's spiritual properties. People most frequently, when they feel Moldavite energy, they feel it as heat or warmth, especially if it's the first time they've felt stone energy or the first time they've encountered Moldavite. And I've seen this happen thousands of times in my 30-something years of doing this work. There's even a phenomenon that some people experience that we call the Moldavite flush. And that is where there's a heart opening and it brings blood up into the cheeks, and people feel hot and their cheeks get flushed. And there's often an emotional release that goes with that. So the intensity of Moldavite's energetic, its energies, for many people is really big. And some people can't be around it for a long period of time at first. Kathy was like that. I gave her Moldavite to wear. She couldn't wear it for more than about a half hour before the energy was too much. But she did keep doing that, and after a while she became acclimated to it, to the point where instead of being overwhelming, it was just plain nourishing. And now she wears Moldavite every day, pretty much all day long. And that's the case with many people. So one of the things Moldavite does, and you can recognize that that's the Moldavite you're feeling, is when you get that heat or that flush. Another thing that it frequently does is, as it did with me, it can open any chakra or all the chakras. You place it in a certain area and it can activate that area. The drama of what happened with me is not typical, but people have very intense experiences with Moldavite very frequently. Another thing I've noticed for myself and many people is that Moldavite catalyzes an increase in the frequency and the meaningfulness of synchronicities in your life. So many things happened from the time Moldavite got hold of me in terms of meeting the right person at the right time, running into the right stone at the perfect moment, having new stones like phenakite come to me, and it became my job to bring them forth into the metaphysical community. It was certainly my job to do that with Moldavite. That was one of the major reasons that I was born this time, I think. But you get that increase in synchronicities, and there always seem to be along the path of your highest destiny. It's as though Moldavite has a kind of spiritual radar that, as I said, attracts that which you need for your development and repels that which you need to let go of. So I've got many, many letters from people who say that everything from jobs to toxic relationships or jobs that were not what you're meant to do were lost. whether they thought they wanted to let go of those things or not, and also new things that they maybe wouldn't have dared to go for came to them. So, everybody likes that kind of synchronicity. And it's, many people have said, when you bring Moldavite into your life, get ready for things to go fast, because it doesn't fool around. It puts you on the homing beacon to where you're supposed to go. And, it takes you there in a hurry. I think with many of us, it might be because we are a little bit behind schedule. But who knows? I do know that it has that tendency to go fast. And it accelerates development and transformation. Always, I think, to the highest good. I've never felt otherwise. And it's certainly been true for me. Another thing to say about Moldavite is it has a trickster quality to it. It's a benign trickster in the sense that I feel like the things that happen are either there to demonstrate something to us, to illuminate something we need to see, or they're there to trick us to go the right way when we might not otherwise do it. One of the things that Moldavite has done that has blown the minds of many people is it knows how to disappear and reappear, apparently. And I've experienced that. This Moldavite that I've held up several times, the first one that I had, it has gone missing a number of times. Like, I leave it on the dresser, it's gone for 2 weeks. It shows up 2 weeks later in the house, in a house plant, like in the dirt next to the house plant. Or, I again, like, put it on my night table and it's gone the next morning, and a month and a half later it's in the inside pocket of my sport coat. Why does it do that? And I will tell you before I ask that question, the Moldavite also has a sort of Houdini thing that this one did once. Somebody came into our shop that first year we were open, and I had already been experiencing this disappearing and reappearing of Moldavite. And a customer came in and she said, my Moldavite's disappeared. I don't know. I mean, I know where I put it and it's not there. And she was pretty upset about it and didn't know whether to buy a new one or what to do. So I said, well, it'll probably come back. Mine's been gone and come back a number of times. And in fact, it's on sabbatical right now. I don't know where it is. And as we were talking about that to this woman, who also was one of the people to get the most dramatic Moldavite flush I'd ever seen, when she held the Moldavites we had in our shop. But my wife was opening up the safe for the day, getting out our gold jewelry that we kept in there during the night, and also our cash envelope from the day before. And as she opened the safe, she felt a lump in the cash envelope, and she unzipped it. And there was the missing Moldavite that I had just been talking about to that customer. And so it had gotten from where I kept it in our house, from our house to the store, inside our money pouch, inside the safe. That's what I call a Houdini. And, skeptical people will say, you just forgot what you did with it. And, who can say? I can't tell you that that's not true, but I don't believe it's true. The longest time that this stone was ever missing was 14 years. There was a time where I thought, boy, I've really lost it this time, and it's not coming back. And it was gone. I didn't find it for 14 years. And when we were getting ready to move from the United States to New Zealand, we were going through our closets, and I found a pair of pants that I had never worn. It still had all the labels on it. I had bought it sometime or other and had never put them on. And I thought, well, I better try these on so I can decide whether to keep them and put them in the packing that we're doing for New Zealand or not. So I put the pants on, and there was a lump in the pocket, and there was this Moldavite 14 years later, after I'd lost it, in a pair of pants I'd never worn. So that was very convincing to me. And I think, it doesn't say why it's a trickster quality. I mean, it does say one thing to me. I feel as though the Moldavite disappearing, reappearing thing has taught me that what we think of as the solidity of what we call material reality is not as solid or as immovable as we might think. It's more permeable by energies than we realize. And a stone of very high energy like Moldavite seems able to demonstrate that to us. And the intelligence of the being of Moldavite seems to enjoy playing with us in that way. Now that makes sense to me too, because I think of Moldavite as a stone of Hermes, because of the quickness of its energy. Hermes was the Greek trickster god, also the messenger of the divine, also the fastest moving god. That's why he was the messenger. He had wings on his feet. And he was also the founding god of alchemy in the Greek pantheon. So all of these traits really remind me of the way Moldavite is. And the trickster quality just kind of makes me smile. But there have been people, many other people besides me, who have had that experience. And there was even a scientist at one time, John Mack, who was studying the disappearing, reappearing Moldavite phenomenon. And he had a number of cases. He ended up, he passed away before he ever wrote the book he was planning, but that happened with him. So now I'll tell you a couple of things about stones that Moldavite harmonizes with, and then we'll do a Moldavite, I'll tell you how to do a Moldavite Grail meditation, and that'll be our completion of this video. So, stones to use with Moldavite. First of all on the list, and the first stone I really worked with a lot with Moldavite, are Herkimer diamonds. Herkimer diamonds are quartz crystals, little short, very clear, double-terminated crystals found only in the area around Herkimer, New York. They have a very visionary energy, Herkimers do, and I find when you combine them with Moldavite, the power and speed of Moldavite's energy combines very well with the visionary aspect of the Herkimer diamond to bring us a lot of interesting inner experiences and helps you have visionary experiences. Also very good to use them both together to enhance your dreaming. And by the way, if you want to enhance your dreaming, just with Moldavite, if you get a small piece and you tape it up onto your third eye when you go to sleep, I'll guarantee you multiple dreams when you sleep like that. And many people, me included, cannot do that for a whole night because you get so many dreams and such vivid dreams that you need some dreamless sleep. So I end up taking it off. But people who say they don't dream or can't remember dreams, or just people who want to explore their dream life, Moldavite's great for that. Or putting a Moldavite and a Herkimer under your pillow together is great for that too. Moldavite works very well with the whole family of quartz, so rose quartz, citrine, clear quartz, laser wands, all the different forms of clear quartz. There's a synergistic mutual intensification of energies that happens between Moldavite and those stones. If you want to ground the energies of Moldavite a little bit, smoky quartz is great for that. It doesn't diminish the energy, but it does help you stay grounded while you work with it. A stone that will even more powerfully enhance the visionary qualities of Moldavite than Herkimers do is phenakite or phenacite. People say it both ways. Phenakite is the stone that most powerfully opens the third eye of any stone I know, and also the crown. If you use Moldavite over your heart and phenacite at your crown, you can open up that energy corridor very well. And if you put a little bit of your intention into it, you can create a kind of a loop of circulation between here and your heart that is it's good for what I say, activating your whole light body, because this is the core of your light body, that corridor right there. The azestulite family is excellent with Moldavite, and many of you know azestulite, and you know that azestulites are quartz-based, but they have an extra energy that's not found in other types of quartz, and that is the energy of the great central sun. And I believe that that meditation I told you about earlier was a journey to the great central sun that I took with Moldavite. I think that golden sun is what people mean when they talk of the great central sun, which is the spiritual sun that is holographically present in every particle of the universe. So it's the inner sun. It's the sun that is the source of the inner light that I experienced in my body when I had that Moldavite meditation. And it's probably, you could say that it's the source of the light that, the spiritual light that people experience in many different kinds of events. And to bring that light into every cell of our bodies is what azestulite's primary purpose is. And if when that purpose is fulfilled, that's when we have a fully activated body of light incarnated in our physical being, which I believe is really the direction in which spiritual development in human beings should go. I don't think that leaving the earth and ascending and going somewhere else is really our purpose. I think to only remain physical and to not integrate and embody spiritual energies is also not living up to our full purpose. But I believe that the marriage of the light that is our potential within us and the manifestation of it in our physical selves is one way of describing our purpose. And when we do this in our own selves, if we do it simultaneously in the body of the earth, that fulfills the purpose of the earth. At least it's one way of describing what I envision. So, on down the list, Sophia. Sophia is the Sophia stone. I've talked about it in other videos. It's the great stone of the heart. It's the stone that most directly connects us to the being I call the soul of the world, which the Greeks called Sophia, which means wisdom. Moldavite is really at home at the heart, but it's also at home at every chakra. I like it best at the heart, and when I pair it there with Sophia, that dual presence of the divine light and of the soul of the world is an exquisite feeling. So I like those together. In fact, my three that I like to use together most frequently are azestulite. This is New Zealand saurolite azestulite, and Sophia with Moldavite. Those three. So that, anyway, I'll go on from there. Beyond Sophia, for people who want to work with Moldavite on the emotional body and who want to experience a kind of joy, calm, serenity, and the clear ability to articulate your inner knowing, stones such as aquamarine, larimar, and especially azamar work very well combined with Moldavite. So you can find aquamarine, larimar, and azamar, as well as all the other ones I've mentioned, on the Heaven and Earth website. So I won't take time to talk about them, but they're in my books and they're on the website. Pneumite, for those who want to take the journey into the depths of one's being, and that's not in a bad way, just the depths and what's at our core, or who want to do shamanic journeying with Moldavite. The very best ally, I believe, is Pneumite. For those who want to carry Moldavite, what Moldavite does, if you keep it with you through the day, is it kind of stimulates that evolutionary energy all the time and that acceleration of your growth all the time. If you also want to add an element of protection in that mix when you're working that way with Moldavite, carrying a piece of guardianite is a really good thing to do, and it combines very harmoniously with Moldavite. So there's many more stones that Moldavite harmonizes with very well, but those are the ones that I wanted to make a special point of mentioning to you. I hope that I've given you enough of an overview of the wonders of this gem from outer space, the stone of the Holy Grail in the way I view it. And now I'd like to invite you to join me or go back later, and I'll show you what I mean by the Moldavite Grail meditation. So for this meditation, you can just use a piece of Moldavite, or if you want to sort of go full bore, you can use the 3 stones I mentioned earlier. You can use Sophia with Moldavite at your heart, and a zestulite. Could be any kind of a zestulite. I like sarlite for this because it's so gentle and it brings so much light in. But all the zestulites are good for this. So you can use these 3 stones together, or you can just use your Moldavite. So I'm going to do the Grail meditation myself here while we talk, and I'll narrate it so that you see what I'm talking about. But I'm also, as I speak it, I'm going to be visualizing it so that I'll be hopefully coming from a place of feeling what's going on, and I can say something about that to you. I won't do the meditation for the length of time I normally would, because I think that's too long for a video. Maybe a separate video where we just do that would be a good thing. But today I'll just take you through the steps. I'll show you, and then I'll speak very briefly about that afterwards. You know, I gotta share with you though. I've sat here for an hour now and talked about Moldavite to you with about 6 big pieces of Moldavite in front of me, and also my favorite Moldavite gem necklace that I like to wear in front of me here, and the energy has kept building up and building up to the point where I feel so hot and so charged that I have to be very deliberate about saying my words, because the energy is kind of trying to take over. And I'm sure, you know, those of you who are sensitive, you know what it's like. If you sit with a bunch of this material, this Moldavite, for a while, it can get like that. And of course, I welcome that. But, you know, full disclosure, that's what's going on with me and in me right here while I'm talking with you. So now I'll do the Grail meditation. I'm just going to tell you what the steps are. So I begin by putting all 3 stones in my hands in front of me here, and I'll blow my breath across them. And I'll do this as I exhale. I'll be offering myself for relationship and friendship and alliance with the beings of these 3 stones. And as I inhale, I'll be inviting them all into me. I'll let them know that I trust them to come inside me, and I'll let them to know that I wish them well and bless them. So on the inhale, it's the invitation and the affirmation of my trust. On the exhale, it's the blessing and the friendship, the offer of friendship. Okay, so here I go. Now I'll bring the 2 to my heart, and I'll bring the zestulite up here. I'm already feeling a lot, and it's made me a lot more peaceful just in the last minute, a few seconds. Now, before I start, I think I'll tell you rather than try to tell you why I'm doing it. The way this meditation begins is you put the stones where you're seeing me put them, And then inwardly, you envision in your heart area a golden cup, a chalice. This is the shape of the chalice that I envision. This is actually a special one I had made that is embedded with Moldavite in a clay-fired chalice. And we even have Moldavite in the middle inside. You can't see that. But we drink from this sometimes, and it quite makes the water wonderful. But that shape, as a golden chalice in your heart, you begin by envisioning that right at your heart. And you then envision the stones that you're holding, the Rose Sophia and the Moldavite, or just the Moldavite if that's what you're using, inside the cup. And you see them, you see light coming up out of the bowl of the cup. And you just barely see the stones, the tops of the stones inside the cup. And as you breathe and you feel the energies and you keep inviting them in, you envision more and more light pouring out the top of the chalice. And you see then a column, a beam of light shooting up from the chalice to the forehead here where you're holding the azeztulite. And you also see a beam of light go down from the azeztulite down into the chalice. And when this occurs, the intensity of light in the chalice goes up tenfold or hundredfold, and it becomes an intensely glowing vessel of light. And you feel that column in the center circulating light up and down between your forehead and your heart. And you also feel, see, and imagine and allow this light that's pouring out of the chalice to permeate and go through your whole body, through your bloodstream. So as your heart pumps and the chalice glows in your chest, you feel and envision light going through every vessel of your bloodstream into every cell in your body. And you begin to, you'll feel and see this gold-white colored light pouring through everything in you. And you'll begin to feel what it's like as each cell takes in that light, and as each cell becomes fully and completely and filled to overflowing with that light and the energy of that light. And you then let the experience go where it wants to go. You just keep encouraging more light, more light, more light. And if there's a point at which you don't really have to participate in encouraging anything and to simply experience what occurs, then by all means, let it occur. And as you get to a point in this experience where you feel that the moment is right, you inwardly affirm, I am the Grail. I am the Grail. And you see that the chalice is echoed by a larger chalice that is the light around your whole body. And then if you want to go on a journey in your body of light, you can do that. If you simply want to hold the pattern of the activated light body coming out of the Grail in your heart, you can do that. I don't really want to tell you anything beyond what you do to invoke the experience. Once you've invoked it, I think you should let the experience unfold on its own. And afterwards, I would say it's worth writing down what occurs so that you can go back to it. And it's worth doing this more than once. It's worth doing this, quite a number of times. That's why we call them spiritual practices, because they get better as we practice. So I'm going to do this for a moment now. I'm glad I explained it that way, because I can now give my full attention to the process. All right? So I'll be right back. um, I really didn't want to stop, but it didn't seem like the plan was to sit here for 20 minutes and meditate while the video was going. So I kind of got myself to come back, but the energy is very big. It's become, it got so strong very quickly that it's not easy to speak at all. But I hope that the overwhelming feeling of spiritual presence and love that was entering me as I sat with my eyes closed just then will at least come through my voice a little bit, so that some vibration of what occurred will come through to you. It's a beautiful and humbling thing to work with the stones and to work with the soul of the world, with the earth. As I said at the beginning, I think we're in very, very important times, and it would be wrong to say what's coming, because what's coming is the unknown future. My felt sense is that it's sacred, and that however it manifests in both suffering and joy, what's behind it is really sacred and is deeply connected to the destiny of the earth and to us as the earth's spiritual partners. So it's been lovely taking the time to speak to you of this stone that really set me on my path and has been with me every step of the way. And I know many of you already know and love your Moldavites. I hope I've said some things that were of interest to you. I have a new book coming out, The Alchemy of Stones. It goes very much into depth about what the potential of our work with stones really is, and how we can work with them and with the earth for the mutual evolution or the mutual transformation of ourselves and the earth in service to the soul of the world. One of the things that Jung said that I love very much is he said that the work of the spiritual alchemist is not primarily for herself or himself, but is for the benefit of the deity who's asleep in matter. And the redemption of that being, the soul of the world, was the alchemist's ultimate purpose. So, as it happens when anything like this, when this purpose is fulfilled, we all benefit greatly. It fulfills us too. So it's a joy to be on this path and to share it with you. And if you want to know more, or if you want to order the Alchemy of Stones book, you can go to Heaven and Earth at earthlink.net and request a catalog, or go to our website, or watch the next video. Many, many blessings to you. Thank you very much.